theory, not in political theory or in international political economy, relation. So that leaving that aside, when I was told that whether I should uh, try to give a lecture, deliberate on this particular topic, so I thought about making the jump and seeing whether I can learn something from it. So this is more of a of certain parts thought over insofar as uh, the BRICS is concerned. And as Shyamalendu that pointed out, BRICS is why it is the hot topic is not, I'll argue, not because of BRICS, you know. So that is, I think, an irony of which we must keep it in mind. Uh, we all are aware of the basic, you know, kind of evolution of BRICS, but there are certain points I'd like to argue, which I think is very important to keep in mind. Uh, so it's already, if you talk about BRICS plus in terms of started with four members, uh, and I'll talk about it, uh, moving into five. And then I think Indonesia is the latest country to have joined. Uh, it's already a big part of the world population, and it is already, as I'll argue, quite economically substantial, and uh, is certainly an axis of power. There's no doubt about it, which is why it is such a important uh, uh, event it has become. Now, here I would like to begin by saying that uh, BRICS, as it stands, was not really supposed to be important uh, by design. In fact, it was actually coined by the chief of Goldman Sachs, uh, who is, who kind of wanted to club a few members uh, who were not part of the G7, you know. So he used BRIC actually, leaving South Africa out. South Africa was not initially there, and that uh, quite accidentally then the name BRIC came out. Indonesia was supposed to be in and not, I think, not Russia, but so it was supposed to be big, but Russia was seen as a larger source of energy than Indonesia. So uh, Russia came in, was included. So it's by accident that the term BRIC appeared in history, and it was only after 2010, I think 10 or 11, I forgot, that South Africa joined. And thereafter, of course, recently some members have joined, some members like Argentina were supposed to join, but they did not, you know. Those kinds of things are there. So basically, it is when we are talking about BRICS, the five major nation: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. So it's by accident, and it was very clear to at least they didn't. I don't think they took it very seriously when the term was coined. As a kind of non-Western counterpart of G7. Uh, and you know, two of the foremost economists, Nicholas Stern and Joseph Stiglitz, actually, they put out a paper which was, they were in 2011 or 12, I forgot, where they uh, argued in favor of a BRICS bank, and which later on evolved, the idea kind of took its own form and became the international, the development bank, as we know it today. So national development. I'll talk about it. So point is, even the bank actually, the basic exploratory paper was actually coined by two people who were associated with the World Bank. And Nicholas Stern was very clear that that he wanted a stable kind of space uh, among these groups, so that uh, corporate, that there is a smooth relation between uh, the corporations and the nation state, so that capitalism could function in a smooth way, So I think it's very important to keep in mind that there's often a tendency for us to jump BRICS as, there could be a tendency, not that there is, that it's an anti-capitalist uh, bloc or an anti-imperialist bloc as it evolved. It was nothing of that kind. It was just a bloc which came together, and I think uh, took a form on its own, life of its own, in terms of uh, mainly in terms of trade, actually. And so uh, that being so, and 2015, the BRICS Bank was formalized, actually. It came into being. So, you know, this was okay as far as we go. But why did why is BRICS suddenly a question, or has become so important? So this is something that I would like to stress here, or like to kind of think through. Uh, Now, one thing is very clear, that few questions in my mind actually rose. It's not clear, actually, because it was not clear. A few things in my mind rose in the present context. Many of are aware of it, so I'm not going to rehash them. Of course, I'm going to talk about it. Uh, but the important issue, we are treating of almost like BRICS not as a bloc but as an alliance. Is the question, at least Donald Trump, President of the United States, uh, is taking a position as if it's a kind of bloc tending towards, and which has the potential to emerge into as an alliance. It's against, as a will argue, as against U.S. hegemony. So, can or would BRICS really, which is a bloc, non-Western bloc, turn into a non-Western, alliance? So, even if we are going to talk about imperialism later on, not at this moment, I don't think that come to this as anti-imperialism, as Lula and others some are tending to talk about. It is also by accident, I think, more by accident than by its own kind of objective regarding what it wanted to become. So, uh, BRICS should be look more as a contingently formed force in history, which is also, as it is evolving, it is also driven by uh, different kinds of moments of history, and some very unpredictable. So that is this turbulence is very important to keep in mind here. Many people are also asking, actually, and that's a fair question, I think, as that whether it's the question that is lurking in the background, actually, is it about BRICS-led alliance, or actually a China-led BRICS bloc, Uh, so that is also very important, perhaps, to think of. Not that I do here, at least, but that's a question, that's a position that some people are taking, that BRICS is basically China. But I'm not going to take that position here, at least. I'm not in a position to talk about it here. Uh, the question, of course, is we know that the BRICS as a bloc is facing a relentless attack presently from Donald Trump. Can it? So the question is, can it survive this attack? That is, the question is, can it survive at all as a bloc? We don't know. I mean, the answer to it, uh, or the question, or the some arguments I've seen is putting the other way, being kind of a lot of faith on the BRICS and making the argument that perhaps it's a reflection of US hegemony in terminal decline. So the British Empire declined. Now it's the time of US empire in decline. So that's what's happening actually as we in transition, as we proceed. So these are some issues I think which are just some of the questions which are there. Let me just to foreground my uh, discussion here, just to talk about Donald Trump, and why I'm saying by accident, as if BRICS has become a kind of force, it's giving it a more of a homogeneous, you know, power, as if it's uh, rather than countries would have come together with different self-interest, which BRICS is. But in the eyes of Donald Trump, it's very clear, that there is. These are all quotes from Trump in recent times, and he sees BRICS as clearly as the number one enemy. This is coming against the background of, and I'll maybe refer to it in a minute, of the terminal decline, I think, in influence at least. I shouldn't use the word terminal, but certainly decline, secular decline of European Union. It had already declined as a military power. It's completely dependent uh, on United States, and its economic power is also declining. There's no doubt about it. So, from the perspective of Donald Trump, is very clear. And this was not just Trump. I think by Joe Biden also. Though Joe Biden was more worried about China, is rather than BRICS, is more worried about the component of C in the BRICS, that is China. Trump's anxiety is clearly he has, uh, you know, uh, put everybody in his firing lines, all the members here, taking BRICS as a block. And his basic argument is that it's coming from two ways, that there's no way that it can be allowed to, the bottom line is, no way it can be allowed to dethrone the US hegemony. And US hegemony, so this is an acknowledgement that the threat has appeared. Here, that BRICS is a threat. Okay, so the question that arises is why, how come that even 30, 40 years ago, this was unthinkable, right? Or when the term BRICS was coined, it was unthinkable, So how come, in what sense can we make that this is a powerhouse actually? So we need some evidence actually, and certain context in order to reflect on Trump's anxiety, because this is not a reflection just on Trump's anxiety. It's also a reflection on questions regarding uh, the dominance of United States-led alliance, certainly. So there are question marks on it. And it's just not a, I'll talk about it, it's not just a dollar question, but associated with the dollar question is the decline of uh, United States and European Union as an economic powerhouse, and the rise of BRICS countries. So I'll talk about this context a little bit. I think that's very important to understand, and to understand the point of uh, onslaught that BRICS members are facing, in my opinion. So it's not that Donald Trump's position reflects a kind of a mad person's or uh, you know, uh, a dirty kind of piece of work that somebody with absolute power, which he's arrogating for himself, is trying to, uh, you know, uh, implement. But uh, it's also, in my opinion, a well thought out, well calculated strategy. It's part of that, actually. So I'll give uh, Trump more credit than what is normally given. So let's look at some of the context. So when I think of the U.S. hegemony, and think of the dominance that this when I'm talking about U.S. hegemonic bloc, I mean United States and the European Union, which uh, are really at the always at the call of United States, whether it is economically or militarily. So when we talk about that, these are at least Trump's base here. So there's no doubt at the heart of it is global capitalism, and there are few components of global capitalism which and the dominance of which by global capitalism we mean global capitalism maintained by U.S. dominance, and that dominance is based on certain uh, nodal points, in my opinion. There could be more. These are some important ones I picked out one at the present time. Uh, at least the way I see, the various strategies being played out. One is, of course, the dollar dominance. The other attached to the dollar dominance is the role of finance and Wall Street. Dominance of finance and Wall Street uh, as the route through which financial flows would happen in the world, the dominant route. Whether that dominance is being maintained or not, could be maintained or not. The third is the battle competition over tech capital, and that's basically between, as it stands now, between United States and China. The United States was overwhelmingly dominant power, but now we know China is coming back. I'll spend a few minutes on it. And of course, there is another node of that of dominance, which is the that United States domestic consumption demand is the largest, has the largest share of consumption demand in the world. So it has that kind of power. That's why Trump can use tariffs, as a weapon, by simply by cutting off the whoever it doesn't like uh, uh, from the consumption market. So here, domestic consumption really is an economic category, but as I see it, it's also part of the political machinations here in terms of the weapon that Trump is using here. Uh, the other aspects of this global, which maintaining this global capitalist architecture, I should say, is other World Bank and the IMF, and I'll talk about this. That is the uh, international banking systems. So, banking system of lending to various nations, and the banking system of bailout, or the fund system of bailout, which is the international for countries in crisis, balance of payment crisis, debt crisis, and so on and so forth, currency crisis, which is the IMF here. So that's the global architecture. And what I will talk about a little bit is the dominance of United States in that global architecture. That's very important to also, I think, acknowledge. And when he's talking about, stopping the BRICS Bank from, uh, you know, uh, being become a substitute of World Bank and IMF, as Trump seems to be fearing, is so that architecture is certainly so. All of I think most of people are aware that Trump has moved from bilateralism, multilateralism to unilateralism, and so but and he has, smashed through various kinds of accords or treaties and so on, and he's doing it in the process. He doesn't care about. But as of now, it's the sanctity of the World Bank and IMF is still maintained. And I'm going to argue the reason why it is maintained is US dominance over it is still now guaranteed. Yeah. And in fact, the the bank that BRICS are we are going to talk about a little bit, and which would be a vehicle of moving local currencies. It is one of the design of those banks, and that bank is very well thought out in terms of design. Unlike the existence of BRICS, as a formation, so that it is formulated, structured, designed in a way which is contrary to that of the political design of governance design of IMF and World Bank. And so that is, I think, also very important acknowledge. The, the other one, which one should not, you know, no way one should ignore, is the role of United States military. Uh, for whatever United States may say of China or India or other countries, United States is, the uncontested, as it stands even now, military power. Uh, uh, Having base globally, I think in 750 places, across 80 countries. No country can even come close to what no other country can even come close to what United States wields in terms of military power. Yeah. And given its military prowess, keeping it that aside, its dominance over finance, its dominance over World Bank, IMF, and so on and so forth, ensures that it could always go for sanctions. It could go for, as it has gone for, asset confiscations, of various kinds, and the role of United States in regime change after the Second World War, uh, you know, numerous changes, and its attempt for regime changes is well documented and well known, actually. So, and the military, of course, power it has, uh, and the financial power it has, it helps in that regard. So, the U.S. hegemony that it maintains is a result of all of these aspects, which are ensuring that the three circuits of capital, the productive capital, financial capital, merchant capital, they are, in intertwined way, the dominance of United States is there actually in some way or other. So that's what uh, I think is the architecture. What Trump is very important. This is not the upper part is not something which is peculiar to Trump, but certainly one thing which is peculiar to Trump also is the comeback of race. I think uh, white male, specifically very important here, as the base of the MAGA, make America great again, and it's a Christian piece, So the kind of capital sustained by a racialized, taking a race kind of a racialized form, and certainly backed by a Christian base here. So I'm not going to talk about the latter part here, but we need to keep the upper portion in mind. The way I've thought about it. There could be others which I may have missed. It's not that these aspects connected to global capital are disparate, segmented. It's nowhere. These are all connected with one another. And we'll talk about maybe some connections here, how they operate, and how they could be and are being, and perhaps would be used to prevent BRICS from, working as a even as a bloc, trying to prevent. So when we are talking about U.S. hegemony, U.S. dominance, it is this architecture that Trump wants to, and the Republican Party wants to maintain. Uh, just not Trump, but you know, the U.S. Ruling elite here. Okay, coming back now here to few things we are going to talk about. Uh, going to uh, the changes that have happened in the last 40 years. Okay, and all of us are aware that we moved from bipolar, multipolar, whatever world to a unipolar world with the, you had from the 80s to the 90s, the collapse of the Soviet Union, destruction of collapse of Keynesianism, welfare state as we knew it, and very important event, just keep this in mind, turn of India and China and India uh, to embrace new global architecture. So Soviet Union's splintering, Russia emerging, uh, and China, India, very poor country in terms of per capita income, uh, or in terms of share of world GDP. I'm going to talk about this a little bit. Uh, and South Africa just coming out of apartheid. So when you think about that, you know, those nations were nowhere insofar as the power equations were concerned. And you saw that we all of us know about the emergence of during that period in the 80s of the new global architecture. And I'm going to talk about it a little bit. Uh, and come back to it. Not that I'm going to talk about all the nodes, it's not possible. Certain nodes I will certainly reflect. Okay. Um, Now, very interestingly, how did this new architecture, what came to be known as Washington consensus, and even beyond Washington consensus, how did it really, this new global architecture, how did it come about? And Joseph Stiglitz here makes an interesting point here. And just, I don't want to simplify the matter here, but I'm simplifying it just to enter into a different argument, which I will make actually, so that it helps me. And he makes the interesting point, you see, in relation to my architecture, which I just, to that whole block which I pointed about US hegemony. It's a set of policies which were taken between the 15th and 19th century streets of Washington, where the headquarters of IMF, US Treasury, and World Bank, they exist. So uh, it makes that's a very telling comment about somebody who was became the president of the World Bank and who, who knew about what was going on that time. And he goes on to lay down what basically neoliberalism is and how it was supposed to promote global capitalism through free trade and capital account convertibility. So these are points which are very well known actually. So I'm not going to rehash much here. So less intervention of the state, but stabilization, liberalization, privatization. You can almost see that how our own new economic policies actually are reflections of what Stiglitz he was trying to say were forged actually. Uh, and why I'm putting it here, because insofar as the global architecture is concerned, what we came to be known as the new global order, which came up in the 80s, 90s, they were really the formulation of the West. And that's the important point I think needs to be recognized. And here, very poor countries like, in terms of development parameters, like China, India, and Russia have been broken down, parceled out. So Soviet Union, outside Soviet Union, becoming poorer actually. So they were nowhere in the picture actually. So they had to walk in, embraced the new global order that was being put forward here, formulated, forged by the West. By West, I mean the US-led alliance, So United States, European Union, Japan, the main powerhouse, economic powerhouse, backed by the military power of United States. Uh, So this scenario, uh, is needs to be kept in mind. Now, here it's very telling also. So this was a research I did a very long time ago, actually, looking at the relation between this architecture. So when I'm talking about this architecture like World Bank, IMF, one should not look at World Bank, IMF, and all the other institutions as disparate, as separate for the emergence of global capitalism or neoliberal globalization, the association of neoliberal globalization with global capitalism. So they worked in tandem. They're very clear about their specialized role. That the World Bank their objective is to generate growth through free trade, uh, and in an environment where macroeconomic stability with low inflation is guaranteed. So World Bank would of course ensure that various poverty reduction strategy, ensuring high growth through high growth rate. So basically penetration of market and so on and so forth. These are well known, well researched. On the other hand, the IMF's role was that it would take care of systemic crisis in within capitalist system, various kind of systemic crisis that beset nation states, in a macroeconomic that is systemic form, so might have it would intervene here through fiscal monetary policy regarding how it should be conducted, exchange rate policies, and so on and so forth. So it had its medicine. So both World Bank and IMF uh, had medicinal cure, ready-made for the rest of the world, in line with the consensus that was forged here. And the consensus, certainly, whatever world it created, we know neoliberal globalization, global capitalism, amalgamation of the two, the world it created, the new global order, we may call it, that in turn was maintained the hegemony of and supposed to maintain in the future after having defeated the Soviet Union, the future of the US-led hegemonic power. That was supposed to be guaranteed here. And it was very clear. These are all World Bank quotes I'm giving you. That as it was laying down what it's supposed to be doing. So it was open about initially in during that period about that each institutions, they were part of the respective wheels, spokes of the wheel, who play their particular role and guarantee that the entire this global capitalism is in this new global order will be reproduced in the way that they wanted, and that through this it was ensured that at least here that the US-led hegemony over the globe would be secured and deepened. So anyway, that was the kind of what should I say, spiritual, I may put it that way, trajectory, in a somewhat causal manner, if I may look at it. Now, why I did it this way, that whatever you may have thought of, or whatever may have been the design, the world did not turn out the way they thought it would turn. And the surprise child in history during this period was no doubt China. And in other words, if somebody asks me that you had globalization, but who were the winners of globalization? And who are the losers of globalization? So if it was created in the 15th and 19th street, this whole architecture, so who were and supposed to benefit the West and maintain its hegemony, at least benefit everybody. That was the call. But through maintaining the hegemony of the US-led dominance, in under no imagination did they think that their relative power, economic power, would decline. Under no imagination. And it was I have not come across a single piece of writings during those 2 decades where anybody has pointed out that this was supposed to happen. So now, if you look at what really did happen, and I'm talking, GDP, world GDP, share of GDP can be maintained, can be estimated in two ways: through purchasing power parity, that is a dollar, how much it will be able to buy in New York and how much it will be buy in Beijing. The power of the dollar, whatever purchasing power, or it can be in terms of nominal, uh, dollar. So it can be either purchasing power of, in terms of, you can measure it, or in terms of dollar. These are the two ways you can measure. It doesn't matter. In fact, World Bank, IMF puts up both ways. So if you go by the nominal share of GDP, United States is still ahead of China, but China is catching up. And many people argue that in another 10, 15 years, China will overtake the United States in terms of nominal GDP. But in terms of purchasing power, uh, if you look at this figure, and that's enough to show for us to understand the trend, actually. Now, if you look at the 1980s, when China was joining globalization in early 90s, and India was joining globalization, China and India, China is this black box, and India is this box. I mean, they were nowhere in the picture compared to the European Union, big countries, or forget about the United States. China was even poorer than India during that. This is in terms of income measure that we are talking about. So now you look at, this is actually quite a, when we did it, it's an astonishing figure in the sense it shows the transformation of world capitalism as well. It shows the transformation of the global economy. It also shows the transformation of the centers of capitalism, insofar, at least insofar as production of goods and services are concerned. And it's an astonishing feature. I mean, the miracle of the globalization was really China, and to an extent India. That's why I say, and I keep on saying this. I've been saying this for some times now, that the neoliberal global order was perhaps set up by the West, but the real winners of it, which was undoubtedly China and to an extent India. And it shows the complete turn of history, and China's you know growth and growth driven development is simply incredible. If you have any uh, understanding of what growth rate means, then it's like 100 years of what Europe achieved in 100 years. China's development in terms of what Europe achieved in 100 years can be compressed into 30 years. Of course, there is huge cost they had to bear for it, and the people bore for it, the changes. But let's not get into that. This is not the talk for this. We are talking about, you know whatever is happening within, driven by capitalism. So the centers of uh, capitalism, at least insofar as production of goods and services, mainly manufacturing, we are talking about, and to an extent service also, uh, shifted to a great extent, as you can see, to India. And it shows the context in which Biden, to a certain extent before Trump, and certainly Trump, actually, uh, they are freaking out. Actually. So uh, it's a relative. If you look at what has happened over a period, longitudinal, if you take the longitudinal view, what you get is a relative decline of uh, the West, the Western economic powers, and the rise of the uh, China, India, and certainly now the BRICS countries. So just to put up another figure, and this is again based on purchasing power parity. In terms of you know what may happen. The estimation, the kind of trend, if you take the BRICS country as a whole and the European Union as a whole, in terms of so in terms of GDP share, world GDP share, and you see the trend is very clear, and it's a historic, you know. In a way, I think this trend, no matter what Trump does, that's not, I find it very hard to imagine that it's going to change, actually, uh, where, insofar as this is concerned, And one of the point of Trump's attack, actually, as BRICS nations are coming together. So, as and I'll talk about it. Share of GDP increases. So, what BRICS nations can do is they can start to engage in trading with one another more and more. Okay, as trading with one another increases, you can shift the currency in terms of trading from dollar, which is the vehicle currency so far. You can start shifting it to local currency. And so once, not only are you losing your relative power over the production of economic goods and services, the GDP, but you are also losing the power over the financial means through which those goods and services are going to move. And Trump's attack, in my opinion, is very strategic. He is he's bent on preventing and overturning this tendency uh, to the extent it is possible. Now, to the extent he wants to do, whether it is possible or not, my point is we don't know what will happen in history. Nobody can predict that. But this is a trend, as you can see clearly. Now, figures may be here or there, but a little bit numbers, but the trend is very clear. Uh, and so now, having said look at this aspect, and just to give you another indication, insofar as manufacture is concerned, even after so much sanctions, control, protectionism against China, even now, as of 2024, World Bank's figure shows that China's share of manufacturing in the world is 31.6%. Okay. In other words, anything that we are, uh, using in terms of goods and services, perhaps has components or inputs, not the final product, whose print is there in somewhere in China. So that's the extent of the change that has happened in the last 25 years. And the trend is almost as if it seems irreversible and fast. It's not. So for example, the growth rate in European Union is, I don't know about the European Union as a whole, but I think it's practically stagnant. It's not moving. In some countries, it has recorded, like powerhouse Germany, has recorded even negative growth rate. I think in 1 or 2 years, so it's declining. Production of goods and services. But all the BRICS nations, the prediction of IMF is that all the BRICS nations have shown a growth rate between of more than 1 to 6% or 7%, and they will be growing, showing positive growth rate. So the kind of tendency you see as of now stands is very clear as far as I'm concerned. Just to look at one of the things changes, few indications. Very the tech competition when we are talking about. Okay, so United States, even now today, is way ahead in technology. That's what we understood. But look at the changes it's happening. This is a institute which, like Oxfam, tracks poverty. Inequality Center of Piketty tracks the inequalities in the world. Australian Strategic Policy Institute, it tracks global leadership of critical technology. And the figures it brought out actually in 2024-25, I think recently, it's quite stunning actually. And this is, I don't know how to make sense of it, but it shows, and all in all the leading technological sectors, actually, uh, China is now the leaders, actually, emerging as the leader. It's not that it has already emerged, but it is tending to. The tendency is very clear. Even India is actually shown to be now in second position in six of the 64 technologies. So the the writing in the wall seems to be indicative of certain movement that we are globally observing. And the observation is in favor, as it stands now, of the BRICS country relative to United States and European Union. The worst has been European Union. It's very clear its competitive edge has been declined, is in decline. And so that's something I don't want to spend any more time on. But even now, United States, for example, in artificial intelligence or other technology, United States, there are some technology United States is leading, uh, important technologies. But China is certainly, many companies in China, certainly some we are aware of the names, are catching up very fast. So it's a question of catching up, actually. How fast these BRICS nations led by China are catching up. Uh, Now, let's come to this aspect of global uh, dollar dominance. And that's very crucial. So that's left clearly the dominance in terms of goods and services. That if you look at even say in 1985, that United States and European Union in terms of goods and services relative share, it dominated, actually. you know. So that dominance is certainly in decline. In fact, one of the Trump's position is very clear. He wants production, as you are all aware, come back to reverse this tendency, the production tendency I was talking about, for manufacturing and other services and other kinds of, uh, you know, uh, you know, additions which are to gross domestic product and growth rate. He wants them to come back to United States. And that's one of his point of Make America Great Again, that we will produce all goods and services, not only for ourselves, but also for the world. Uh, but I've given you the picture. So it tells you the one of the reasons why it's putting up this tariff. It's just not to make others difficult to sell, but it is also putting a cost for American companies or European companies that have gone outside of United States, asking them to come back to United States and produce here. So to reverse that tendency, that's definitely one of his strategy, in my opinion. Whether they will come back or not, that's I think, very difficult because we don't have the time to go over it. So, but that's the wish that he has. All right, let's come to dollar dominance. How many minutes do I have?
Oh, you can continue for a while. It's fine.
Oh, all right. Coming to dollar dominance and Wall Street, which is, as we know, two very important notes. And this is uh, that, as I was telling you, that as you become the economic powerhouse in terms of production of goods and services, like United States did from the 1930s, 40s onwards, as the breaking point in Europe was First World War, which really broke its economy, and the parallel rise of United States as an industrial powerhouse, relatively. So, uh, paralleled with that, the Great Depression and the rise of dollar. So, uh, the fall of Great Britain as an economic power, fall of pound as the major currency, the rise of United States as an economic powerhouse for production of goods and services, and the rise of dollar as the vehicle currency. these they kind of move historically. They have moved in parallel, and uh, very important then, the Second World War, as it ended, of course, all the European nations, Japan, they were smashed, we know. Uh, uh, and the country that was relatively left unscathed was United States. And in fact, it has been able to, expand its economy, get out of recession finally through this industrial military expenditure, huge expenditure, technological development, all those things. So it had built in huge capacity during the war that could now be used for the production of civilian goods and services. But the question was, so US economy was left relatively unscathed. So uh, and while the European and the Japanese economy, that is, let me club it together, call it the rest of the Western economy, were kind of shattered here. So, what arrangement did they come? The arrangement was very clearly that this took the form of what is known as the Marshall Plan. So the United States would run a trade surplus, meaning United States would produce the goods and services, uh, sell the goods and services uh, to the European countries and to Japan. Uh, that included investing in infrastructure and other infrastructure, and as well as you know giving various kinds of generating various kinds of consumption demand in those countries. So question was, how those could those countries afford it? you know so United States can produce it, but how can those countries afford it? The answer was the United States was going to sell those produce in the uh, to the West, uh, and give them loan in turn, and they would generate profit out of it and turn the profit surplus into loan that they would give to those countries. That was part of the arrangement of Marshall Plan. The crucial here was that you had to have a currency, through which this arrangement. So you run a trade surplus. Yeah? The Western European countries would be the, uh, they would be the uh, uh, net borrowers, while United States would be the net lenders. So the United States was producing, generating surplus, and it was lending uh, to the uh, to the rest of the world. And so it became the trade surplus and the world's primary creditor. And through this Marshall Plan. And during this time, the World Bank and the IMF, the IMF mainly was created. All those institutions were also created, and through this, what happened? Dollar emerged as the kind of the vehicle currency. Dollar was attached to gold, so that is why it was called. So $35 was equal to 1 ounce of gold, but the rest of the currency of the world were fixed in terms of dollars. So you had fixed exchange rate, where the dollar, with respect to dollar, and the dollar was the rate of the dollar was fixed with respect to 1 ounce of gold, and so it was the dollar that was used as the vehicle currency throughout the world. So that the hegemony of the dominance of the United States as a military power, was guaranteed. In a way, the subjugation of the Western Europe to United States started right from that point. So even when United States in the 1971 would break out of this was known as the Bretton Woods Agreement. So it would break out of the Bretton Woods Agreement. It could do it on its own, regardless of what the Western European countries uh, thought. And they were not very pleased with it, but they couldn't do anything about it, actually. Okay, so that is very important way through which the US maintained started to exercise its dominance all over the world. Not just that, it also became uh, outside of the USSR, it became the supreme military power. So it, had enormous uh, expenditure on military, and this expenditure was tagged, through dollars, by keeping forces in the rest of the world. So the dollar was flowing, through various means. So to cut the story short, and we are not going to spend much time on it, but the point is there came a time that this standard, that certain amount of gold against the dollar, that had to be maintained by the United States. It could not, especially the Vietnam War and Lyndon Johnson's programs, Great Inclusion, the exact name I forgot, but uh, the various inclusion programs, these were very expensive programs. So, you could not maintain the gold exchange standard, the number of gold vis-a-vis the number of dollars. There had to be a certain standard which had to be maintained. We need not go into that in details. So it was impossible for United States to control its own recession, come out of it, by maintaining the gold exchange standard. So it had to come out of the gold exchange standard, leave the Bretton Woods Agreement. But the question was this: even if it was doing it, how would it maintain its hegemony? Because by that time, by the late 1960s, United States enterprises, industrial enterprises, were no longer relatively the more profitable ones. In fact, many of them had been, in many sectors, have been overtaken by the Western European firms, German, French, and by the Japanese firms. So the relative strength of United States in the real economy, in the production of goods and services, was declining. So unemployment and other things became a major problem there. And the currency also could not be maintained. So the whole point was the United States had gone into a crisis. So the Vietnam War, the crisis, the moral crisis, was accompanied by a severe economic crisis at that. And it was also a crisis of the question. And this was the Citibank vice president was, in a congressional hearing, uh, was making the argument that uh, the central problem is now that if we leave out, if we quit dollar as the vehicle currency, the gold exchange standard, if we quit, how do we maintain? Very telling point. A dollar, you would imagine any currency is a liquidity problem, right? So we are worried about liquidity, but he made, I think it's a very perceptive point that the hegemony, not liquidity, is what the dollar problem is all about. That how do we ensure that the dominance of dollar is maintained as we quit the Bretton Woods Pact, And so the second phase, the answer was, and this was Paul Volcker and others who came out, the young Turks who came out and found a solution. But till that time, Wall Street was not important, actually, relatively, So, because the United States industrial enterprises were, very productive, and they could generate a lot of surplus value, and that would flow out, portion. So you had that kind of strength, but as it declined, uh, then the relative importance of Wall Street showed up actually here, because the solution that was found by Paul Volcker and others, Henry Kissinger, not really Henry Kissinger, but I think Paul Volcker meant, who became Ronald Reagan's Treasury Secretary, I think, later on, actually. But I forgot what he became, but he was basically kind of our finance minister. That's what he became. I don't remember the names that they had, but the basic answer that they had was that okay, fine. The rest of the world now is generating a profit. what if we become the recipients of the profit? So we can't export our profit or surplus value to the rest of the world, but let's now become the recipient of the profit to the rest of the world. And they had the other means through which they could do it. So they opened the Wall Street here. Wall Street now became the paramount institution through which this change would happen. That the United States turned from, uh, you know, uh, exporting country, trade surplus country to a trade deficit country. And so it was, uh, you know, but the trade deficit meant that the rest of the world, the capitalists in the rest of the world, were accumulating huge surplus. And the argument was, this architecture was created that that accumulated surplus would flow now to the Wall Street. And so Wall Street became the recipient of this global of dollar. So dollar then, and dollar was then, uh, you know, uh, uh, you know, it, it was the United States government became the ultimate security, provided the ultimate security for the dollar, and that it somehow found its way to become the reserve currency of the central banks of all the nations. So it came literally the dollar, the global. No longer was it tagged to the gold, but it became fiat, like a fiat currency, like rupee, but now it's a kind of global fiat currency that could be used for trading, that could be used for settlement, for investments, and for all kinds of transactions. So that's how the United States turned from a trade surplus country to a trade deficit country. So we'll talk a little bit more about it, but in a minute. So now, if you look at the current dominance of dollar, there's no doubt about it. Dollar is still dominant. As you see, 50% of the global capital markets. I'm talking about shares, bonds, derivatives, and all of it are flowing through dollars. Actually, are flowing through the Wall Street. The dollar dominance, United States dollar dominance is very clear. That when I'm saying dollar as the reserve currency, that 88% of the foreign exchange trades take place through transactions take place through dollar. 60% global reserves, that is the nation state, the banks of the central banks of the nation states, they hold dollar. So dollar became the most precious currency to hold, among all the currencies. So it triumphed. So that, in other words, the dollar dominance, which was threatened by the crisis of U.S. capitalism, and or the in the 1960s and 70s, and with the withdrawal of the Bretton Woods from the Bretton Woods Pact, that in a curious way, actually, but in a well-structured way, this dominance was allowed to be or guaranteed to be continued after that. Now, interesting is here what's happening vis-a-vis BRICS. As I was telling you, the BRICS nations, they are they have exhibited astonishingly, are exhibiting at the present time astonishing growth of goods and services. So what they can do is they can move away from dollar as the exchange transaction means of settling the transaction. They can start, or even for investment, they can start using the other currency, their local currency, the yuan, the rupee, ruble. So they can rand, South African rand. They can start using these currencies. And here, yuan of course, plays a very important role. But coming to this in a minute. So if you look at what's happening and the anxiety of Trump here, very clear that the trend here also is is very clear that when we are talking about the reserves, I was talking about, right? The reserves, that it is tendency is very clear. The reserves, dollar reserves, it's in, relatively, its importance for the BRICS is still dominant. There's no doubt about it. You can't do without the dollar reserves. You know. But that is relatively declined. Certainly, compared to the global average, the BRICS countries, because they have become relatively now more powerful, they can use their own conduits, trading conduits, and investment conduits to process their transactions and investments through their local currencies. So, on the other hand, on one hand, particularly China, the reduction in of dollar reserves in China is part of a very concerted policy, and it's happening very rapidly. Actually, uh, India also, to a certain extent, that reserve has, to an extent, has reduced. So these nations are diversifying their portfolio of currencies, and here important to understand is the diversification towards gold. So many people ask, why is gold? Suddenly there is, everybody wants to have gold, and the demand for gold is increasing. It's part perhaps of a concerted policy, and of BRICS nations, to change their portfolio of reserve by which settlement would be secured, So that trade-off is what is going on here, and you can see when we are talking about BRICS, we have to talk about China because it's by far the biggest. If you compare all the the rest of the BRICS nation, and you take their GDP, China is bigger than that, actually, single-handedly. And you see the importance of the role of the yuan as a means of settlement. Yuan is the currency of China, and that's increasing, clearly. So this tendency uh, is very clear. Trend. It's again a trend. Yeah, that is very clear. So that's what I was talking about. That the total trade, if you look at the BRICS nation, that's expanding very rapidly. And now at least 30% of the intra BRICS trade now is taking place in local currencies. And Trump is fool. He's seeing all of that actually, and is uh, from his point of view, he would argue the writing is in the wall unless we do something about it. Actually, so uh, you know. Anyway, uh, uh, so one thought I had was, how can you stop it? No matter what tariff you impose, whatever you do, if these nations decide that they are going to, whatever inter trade within, if they are going to do it through local currencies, I don't, it's very difficult to stop it, from happening, So that way, I see that this tendency, at least within the BRICS member, whether these currencies will emerge, to dethrone the dollar, that's very different. We are far off from that. Whether you will have a BRICS currency, we are even further away from that. That's a fantasy as of now, actually. But whether the usage of the local currencies and the respective role of these currencies, local currencies, their power will increase. Certainly, that of the yuan is I think a very important question. And here, the importance of China needs to be flagged. China has not only emerged as a superpower in economic superpower in terms of production of goods and services, but also it is clearly seen, actually, the picture I'm trying to draw, that the way to contest the US hegemony, or to not to you know not to be subsumed under the US hegemony, is to promote the yuan and to maintain its financial independence, and uh, vis-a-vis compete with dollar. through its own currencies. And this is a major event which has taken place in 2023, the birth of the digital currency, that is by the it's a central bank, China central bank digital currency, and through it, countries can transact, take advantage of cross-border payments. And you can do that by avoiding the SWIFT system. So you have the SWIFT as the global system. SWIFT is located in Belgium, to which the global currencies move, and uh, transactions, between banks. Banks are huge, big financial firms. They are huge, so their transactions move through this SWIFT system, and 88% of the SWIFT system is processed through the dollar. And for example, one of the way United States, engages in sanctions, for example, against Russia, against Iran, is to take them off from the SWIFT system, so that they don't have access to the lifeblood of the international financial transaction, which is moving through dollars here. So that's one of the way the power of United States, the hegemony of United States, is maintained here. And what China is trying to do here is to now what it is trying to do is to uh, create, and it has created a new kind of digital currency, as a competitor for SWIFT, through which transactions can now move, in terms of the yuan. It will be situated not in terms of dollars, but in terms of yuan. So anyway, it's far away, but that's you can see the strategy in turn of China here very clear. Um, and you see,
Professor Chakrabarti, if
yes,
you just wind up in a 5-7 minutes,
five seven.
then we could
Okay,
have a little bit of discussion also.
okay. So I'll take 5 to 6 minutes. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Fine. Yeah. So in fact, you can see the contradiction here. It's not very easy actually. Once you are, the political geopolitics is one thing, but dominance of currency is quite, or you know, currency is quite a different ball game. So all of you, us are aware of Javier Milei, right-wing libertarian, allied to Argentina's president, who is allied to United States, and he was very clear. He called China an assassin regime. I don't do anything with China, but for bailing out the peso, he had to rely on yuan, and this is quite important. For the first time, actually, IMF, allowed for a currency swap. So the debt were in dollars, but IMF allowed for the debt to be settled in yuan. And China has been bailing out actually Argentina actually for the last two years, and Argentina has agreed that China will bail it out actually. Okay, so you see, the dominance operates through various ways actually in the world. Even if you uh, say one thing or you want to take a position, it's not so easy actually, because the political economy is so intricately global, and you could be locked in that. And this also shows actually, because I don't have that time, that the growing importance of yuan actually in the world, and that it's now beginning to be used as a settlement, as a currency swap for international debt settlement. But it's still at a very preliminary stage. But just as an example here, there are others I could show, but this is the final, which I want to talk about, is the new development bank, which is very important, uh, which just the objective of new development. And given this context, actually, and the context is the number 3 point, actually, is important. So, why the new development bank, in my opinion, the thought of that this needs now to be strengthened, actually, is that there's a contradiction which has appeared. That BRICS have, as I've shown you, has emerged as a growing world power, and that seems to be irreversible. That's going to increase in terms of real goods and services. But its influence in financing the growth is much less actually. So, and in this regard, the dominance, U.S. hegemonic dominance in finance and dollar is holding it back. And that's perhaps the background of it. I can't go into the details. We don't have the time. Just to very quickly um, uh, talk about the architecture, global architecture. How does U.S. maintain its control over IMF and World Bank? This is the, you know, it has now you see once perhaps it was in sync or in relation to their relative economic power. But as it stands now, okay, if you look at their economic power, clearly the BRICS economic power and European Union is declined. United States, while it has dollar influence, but its relative economic power has declined. But when you look at the influence of IMF, the voting share of IMF, the voting share of World Bank, clearly the developed countries, the Western countries have maintained their dominance. And here it's very important to say that out of this voting share, United States have 16.5%, something like that. And uh, and you need 85% to no country has a veto, but essentially United States has a veto because you need 85% for any important policy proposal to pass. And because United States have 16.5% voting share, it has got effective control over the World Bank, actually, the appointments and so on and so forth. But I think it's the relative strength of the EU and United States compared to the strength in terms of their GDP, there's a contradiction here, which is clearly emerging, and that's the perhaps one of the reasons why the importance of new development bank was felt. So same for the World Bank. There's no difference. I mean, it's basically the same actually. The US maintains its dominance. Now, one important aspect of governance was actually to break away from it. And even if China was, the bigger power, India is already emerging as the second biggest power after China. They have agreed when they uh, you know uh, created the New Development Bank that they would have equal uh, voting share. So uh, and there will be no veto power. So no country will have comparatively more voting share as compared to others. So this is a telling point uh, that the architecture, the global architecture, uh, is also something that is being under consideration of many of these nations as they are thinking through these issues. So just to summarize, uh, uh, very quickly, so what is at stake? Is it BRICS which is at stake, or is it the US hegemony which is at stake? So I wanted to make the point that whether it is unilateralism, tariff war, maintenance of dollar dominance, or tech dominance, however you may, the combination of these various policies that Trump is taking, perhaps with a singular eye, and is open about it actually, is that there's no way that the US hegemony can be overthrown or challenged actually. So clearly sees the BRICS as a threat and is trying to, in my opinion, strategically pick up members to try to dismember, the organization. So perhaps politically BRICS was not that important, but Donald Trump has made it, in my opinion, more important. As a so it has become a historical kind of force, more so than what it thought or it wanted it to be. And the recent quote of Lula actually captures well this tussle that is growing up. So the final point, will BRICS remain an alliance? Can it forge itself, or will it be forced to become an alliance, or will it be a block of disparate nations with self-interest of their own, with contradictions which are there, we know. So will it? Nobody knows whether it will survive or break down, in what form it will survive, and so on and so forth. That is where I will stop. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your lecture. We have 4 questions from Chondrima Basu. It's in the chat box. Should I read out these questions for you, sir?
Can I see the
Yes,
questions?
yes, sir. Just open your chat box.
How do I? Wait.
It's in.
The chat box is at the bottom.
No, but it's not coming. Just a minute.
You have to off your
Just a-
screen sharing.
Yes. I have to turn off my screen sharing.
Yes.
Yes, now I think I can. Yeah, there is a lot of. Yes. Yeah, to Chandrima Boshu's point, uh, you see, beyond, I have not, in my opinion, trading, that was important. There's no doubt about it. It grew as a trading, block. It grew as a trading block. In the course of it, it was thought that as they are becoming more important, more powerful economically, that perhaps uh, they need to diversify from the currency. So there is a need for a bank, also an investment bank. So the bank is now being positioned as new development bank, is positioned as being important. It is as of yet not a substitute of IMF or World Bank, but that's the positioning. So uh, other countries, yes, other countries. If you look at the countries that are lined up to enter, trying to enter to BRICS, uh, you can see that they are clearly, uh, there is a stomach for, uh, you know, uh, and space for many countries to try to enter into BRICS. So BRICS have been growing, and there are countries which are lined up even grow further, for to make BRICS go further. Now, given Trump's attack, counter attack, tariff, and so on and so forth, whether that will happen or not, that's a very different thing, actually. Future of the trading includes the kind of thing. Ground level, internal to these countries. You see, each countries have their internally, as the way I understood, maybe I understood it wrongly, but internally the countries understood it in a very, so far as they, one of the things about these countries are they have the disparate political system, and they have accepted that they are not going to talk or discuss or be concerned with the internal political dynamics of the systems within. So this discussion also I have not touched on. I have not touched on the dynamics within capitalism in each of these countries, other kinds of problems, contradictions within the countries. These are, of course, there, but the BRICS as a nation, they are determined not to, discuss those issues. So, for example, for United States, for European Union, for long, democracy has been a very important vehicle of using the term for sanctions and other kinds of interventions. They're not, given the nature of these uh, states within the BRICS nation. You just look at the political system; they are completely disparate, and they agree that they will remain so. So that's not what is happening inside there. That's not up for discussion in the context of BRICS at least.
If there is any other question or comments from any of the participants of this lecture, they can just unmute and ask the question or put the question in the chat box. I also
Just one last question of Chandrima was suggesting. When you're talking about trading infrastructure, that too depend actually. So when you had sanctions against Russia, the way uh, China, India, and Russia reorganize their trading arrangement, that's which is now what is the bone of contention insofar as uh, Trump is concerned. So that was, I think, innovative actually, insofar as new kinds of infrastructure are there. So you're not going to move, you can't use the SWIFT. So you're going to use the local currencies and you're going to use it in a way, how they are being processed. I don't know the details, but it certainly did not go with the usual route. Not the conventional. You know. So, uh, so these are some of the trading infrastructure are being newly created actually. So similarly for Iran, because Iran is out of the SWIFT. So how do you trade with Iran? So different kinds of trading infrastructure needs to be created here, and logistics need to be created here to make it possible for this to happen.
there are experts here, Professor Shamadar, Professor Basdev Dashgupta, if they have any comments.
I have a quick question, Rajat, may I?
Sure, yes.
Thank you, Professor Chakrabarti. This is Shohini Sengupta for your very informative talk. My question is basically it's more of a curiosity, and I would like to have your views on this. How do you think Brazil is responding at this point in time to Mr. Trump's threat of 50% tariff? What makes them so brave? Your views on this?
See, that's the thing, when I'm saying the politically, they are very disparate. So, when you're talking about Brazil, led by Lula, uh, that it's a very, very left-wing president who coming from the Latin American movement, you know, doesn't believe and has an anti-imperialist plank, perhaps internal to the very existence of the Workers' Party from where he comes from. It's not so straightforward so far as India or China uh, and other countries are concerned. So uh, you can't, you won't, I mean, I will not expect India to respond. In fact, Lula has, I think yesterday I saw, said that you talked with Narendra Modi about this, So, but I'm not sure Narendra Modi would respond in the way Lula responded, or even Xi Jinping would respond in the way uh, Lula responded. So these are not. That's why I'm saying these are disparate countries as it in the bloc. They are not in an alliance, not even like European Union. So they have been forced kind of by the events of history to react to these kinds of policy interventions by Trump. So very difficult to say what will happen because as we speak, all these nations are uh, negotiating with United States separately. What will be the outcome of those negotiations? What will come out of it? Will there be a arrangement regarding anything that needs to be done vis-a-vis BRICS for those countries? We don't know about any of those things. So Lula has comparatively, or Brazil has taken a straightforward chance. But wait, this is the problem. So Argentina before Milei was very aggressive insofar as was interested in joining the BRICS, because of its left-wing government. The moment Milei came to power, it decided that it will not join the BRICS. So if Lula goes away, Bolsonaro comes, or some right-wing force come, what will happen? You don't know actually. We are not. So I'm not sure about the, BRICS will be there, and as trading arrangements we know, but not sure about how far it can gel as an alliance to react to United States when it is taking the position of treating BRICS as an adversary or an enemy to be countered. So, United States is taking it as if it's a homogeneous bloc when it is not actually. And it knows actually it's not a homogeneous bloc. That's why it's trying to play one against the other. In fact, if I remember Trump, when he came to power, he said that, uh, and that's it's very peculiar. The only person he invited, in fact, not the only one, but person he invited first for his inauguration was Xi Jinping. And he made the point that there's no problem in the world that can't be solved by United States and China. So what exactly is the end game here? I think I will be at least not that brave to make a call regarding what's going to happen.
So there are two questions in the chat box by Mujib Azizi. He was one of our ex-participants of the workshop, so former participants. He has two questions.
Yes, put it down. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. No. Regarding the second question, BRICS is already starting to play a relatively stronger role in global markets, or as Trump sees it is destined to play. The tendency is that there. Okay. So that's why the so-called frantic reaction actually. So that tendency is there. Whether it will happen or not, the creation of a different bank as compared to IMF and World Bank, the new development bank, is itself a reflection. It's a bank of where the non-Western countries are not present. Okay, which is supposed to lend for infrastructural development, for trading in local currencies, a bank which is specifically created for this. So this is a global infrastructure which is being created, designed to achieve certain things, which is not, that which is outside the purview of US dominance or European Union dominance. So that again shows it. Now, these things, India and China, particularly in the context of Pakistan's role in the region, my own hunch is, uh, except sending, a few, uh, creating some nuisance across the border, what else can Pakistan do to India? See, irrelevant in the longer picture. Given its relative position, I'm saying if even when India and China had that border conflict, if you look at the trade between India and China, that's gone through the roof. So the point is, uh, that doesn't mean that the relation are good, that there are investments which are going to flow, uh, or that ought to flow, are going to flow between China and India. I think that's why there's a lot of negotiations that are going on, talks going on, because both sides see that both are important to one another, in terms of as an economic power. But uh, you know, I don't find my own position. I may be very wrong. Pakistan is a major you know, we are giving undue importance to Pakistan here, actually, in terms of the bigger picture. That's my point. China, when you're talking China, India, Russia, just look at it tells you where is Pakistan in that economic, if you look at that present picture, you take a GDP or whatever, by whatever criteria, it is nowhere in that picture.
Any questions or comments? Otherwise, I will conclude. Okay. Thank you, sir. In-depth analysis of transformation in the global economic system, which is actually points to reasons why a discussion on BRICS is so significant today. Our discussion today began with certain questions that were raised in the course of our discussions in the first consultative meetings of the project, and we have benefited from the longer discussion in the issues today. So with this, on behalf of CRG, I would like to convey my gratitude to all the attendees of the first online lecture. We are grateful to Professor Anjan Chakrabarti for his lecture and Dr. Shyamalendu Majumdar for his welcome address. The program would not be possible without the mentorship of Professor Ranavi Shamadar. We are thankful to him. Dr. Anita Sengupta, honorary coordinator of the program, helped me to arrange and conduct the program. We are grateful to our funder, Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung South Asia, for keeping their trust for a long time. We are particularly grateful to Britta Peterson, Neha Nagvi, and Jitendra Kumar of RLS. Last but not the least, I'm also thankful to the members of CRG and my colleagues for supporting me to make the program successful. Thank you again, and requesting you to visit our website and social media accounts for our future initiatives. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger.